Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to a LinkedIn live session with me. I'm your host, Dr. Lisa L. Campbell. And today I want to talk about becoming an adjunct instructor. So if you can hear me, please type a one in the chat. If you can hear me, type a one in the chat so I can make sure that you can hear me. So I'm going to just assume that everyone can hear me, and I'm going to go ahead and proceed. So one of the reasons, thank you, I see the one in the chat. All right, so I want to start off with my introduction. So I want to tell you a little bit about my background. In my introduction. So I started in healthcare in 1992. And so again, we are focused on the introduction. All right. So in 1992, I started off as a medical assistant. And while I was working as a medical assistant, I noticed that the new graduates that were coming in, they kind of needed some guidance. And as a medical assistant, one of the things that I did was measure blood pressure. And I saw that these individuals didn't have what appeared to be a solid foundation in their basic skill sets. I also saw that they were not able to accurately take a basic patient history. Now, as a medical assistant, we weren't nursing level or physician level, but they at least needed to be able to ask the patient why they were there today, at least be able to write down the medications, at least be able to describe why the patient was seeing the provider today. And as one graduate after the other started joining the practice, I'm like, something is going on in terms of the quality of the graduates that were coming to our office. And so I've always been of the mindset that instead of complaining about something, you should become a part of the solution and not what you perceive as the problem. So in 1997, I got my first adjunct teaching role working for a for-profit school that had a medical office assistant program. And this was back in the days where we didn't have all of the fancy technology. I said I had the expertise to teach, and they said, go for it. So they gave me a book. They gave me some transparency slides. This was right when PowerPoint was just getting pretty popular. And so they said, have at it. And with me being as a leader, I said, you got this, right? So I was responsible for not only teaching my class, I was responsible for really tweaking the curriculum. And my number one goal for being there was making sure that the graduates came out of school and can transition into the workplace. When I reflect on my own educational journey, I found that there were some instructors that were teaching me they were a little out of touch with what was happening in the real world. And so I said, I'm going to be the instructor, the adjunct that brings the real world into the classroom. And so I started this in 1997. And so today is 2023. And, here we are today. But my journey really started to evolve. So 1997, I was teaching in a face-to-face classroom. And I firmly believe in order to become a little bit more skilled at teaching online, you need to have that on campus experience. In my experience, and I want to be very clear in saying that these views are my views and I do not represent any organization, I think sometimes new adjunct instructors, they hide behind the virtual platform when they're teaching online. And so when I think back to all of my experience, teaching on campus really molded me into the professional speaker that I am today. Oh, by the way, I am coming to you live from the Chicagoland area from the Growth Motivator Live Studio. The Growth Motivator Live Studio, where I will be streaming my TV show starting in June. So 2004, I had an opportunity to teach online. And my experience in the online setting for me was the same. What I was teaching on campus, I need to figure out a way to bring that classroom into the students' living room. That was important to me because I took a program online and I felt like I was all alone. So the other thing that was really beneficial, and what I really want you to understand from my journey as I help you plot out your journey, teaching also helped me transition into a professional speaker. So 1992, started in healthcare as a medical assistant. 1997, got a job as an adjunct instructor. An adjunct, for those of you who don't know, means to add on to the existing faculty that are there full-time. So then in 2003, I started speaking professionally and have continued to do so today on small and large stages. And no matter where I'm teaching, what I'm teaching, I try to provide my audience, my listeners, with an experience. And that was all as a result of working as an adjunct, because I had to come up with a plan to deliver in the classroom setting. Just like for today, I came up with a plan of 8 or so topics that I wanted to cover with you so that you can then jumpstart your journey. So let's go on to topic number 1, which is I want to talk about you exploring the path to becoming an adjunct. So number 1, it does not happen overnight. Okay. You have to prepare yourself for it. So first things first, me teaching in 1997 is a little different than me teaching today. And I've evolved as a person, right? When I started teaching in 1997, I was a lot younger, but my energy and my reason for doing it remains the same: bringing the real world into the classroom. You are not going to be rich teaching. And if that's your end game, not something you want to get into. I teach in all settings because I enjoy sharing my knowledge with others. And I'm not camera shy. And I got sort of a, personality. And so that makes for a better learning experience. So you want to begin to explore your path by deciding why. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this, right? Why am I doing this? Is it because I want to make some money? Is it because I'm going to give back? You want to assess why you want to do this. You also want to assess, can you do it, right? Are you a personable person? Just some food for thought. Now, I will tell you that as an adjunct, and I want to share some of my personal experiences, and I'm still just talking about, exploring the path. Um, I've had some good days and I've had some bad days as an adjunct. And you probably are like, why? Well, there have been situations where I was there to teach, but my learners were not necessarily there to learn. And that was challenging because I'm like, what do you mean? You signed up for school, you're here to learn. And what I found is some of my learners, they were there because they could get a check for attending school. But then here's me on the other side saying, I am here because I want you to learn. Type a 2 in the chat box if you are still here with me live. Type a 2 in the chat box if you are still here with me live. So back in the day, I had one population of students that said, I'm going to get a check. And so that's why I'm here. This is my income. I had another population of students who said, well, the public assistance department told me that I need to do this to keep my public assistance funding. And so I was like, oh, you're not here to learn? So here's me, this excited healthcare professional that wants to teach them everything that's in my big old brain, but their objective didn't align with my objective. I wanted to learn, I wanted to teach, but they didn't necessarily want it to learn. So I struggled with that because I'm teaching coding, medical coding, medical assisting, bachelor's degree students in healthcare administration, health information management, master's degrees. So I'm like, you should be here because you want to learn, not because someone told you you needed to be here. So in my experience, I had to stay focused on my why. And so you have to figure out your why. So let's go to my second topic, which is exploring your path. Okay. So number one, I talked about you need to know your why. But you also should be doing this because you want to showcase your extensive experience and expertise. You want to give back to the future generation of healthcare professionals. So, in exploring your path, I want you to write down your why so that you can continue on this path and keeping that in the back of your mind. So, I'm not going to get rich teaching, right? Now, let's talk about this. And there may be some of you who are teaching today, and I may step on your shoes. I may step on your toes. So let me just tell you, if I step on your toes, just say ouch and keep it moving. Some people are teaching, some professionals are teaching, and they are what we call paycheck professors, meaning they're there to collect a check. Students can tell the difference between someone that's there to teach compared to someone that's there because they want to collect a check to pay for an addition on their roof. Okay. So 3 things I want you to think about. Number one, there are steps involved with becoming an adjunct. So that's number one. Number 2, the qualifications that you have to meet are generally going to vary. So in some instances, they want you to have a bachelor's degree to teach. In other instances, they want you to have a master's degree. And in other situations, they want you to have a doctorate degree. So sometimes people say to me, oh, you're so smart. And I'm like, I got this PhD, honestly, because I was teaching at a school full time at this point. This was in 2002. And I said, how can I make more money? Because I need to pay my bills. And they said, well, you can get a second master's degree or get a doctorate degree. And so in 2004, I started on the path to get to my doctorate degree. As I'm going through these topics, I know you guys are typing in the chat. And what I will do at the end, I will take questions that you all have. If I miss some questions, I will come back later and respond to you on the platform that you were on. Okay, and then number 3, your path should be about you showcasing your skills, your experience, your expertise, and you want to give back. All right, so let's talk about your qualifications. So this is topic number 3. So you want to make sure that your CV, your curriculum vitae, lets the reader know how wonderful you are. Now, I know in the HR world, there was this thing like the resume should only be like 2 pages long and you don't want to include this or that. If I'm a part of a committee that's reviewing resumes for a potential adjunct, I'm looking, what expertise does this person bring to the table? Is this person continuing to learn and grow? If you're not, I'm thinking, wow, are they just here to collect the check? So if you have a resume, it's very easy to create a CV. And you can scan the QR code on the screen to visit my website, to send me a message if you don't want to type in the regular chat. But a CV is just a longer version of a resume. And you know, it's 2023. You can Google what is a CV. Now, let's say you're ready to begin this journey now. What are some of the things you should do? Number 1, you should look on different schools' websites and look at what qualifications they want you to have. Is it that they want you to be skilled at PowerPoint? So here's the deal. If you need to be skilled at putting together a PowerPoint presentation, delivering a PowerPoint presentation, if that's a skill that you don't have, work on it. Why? Most organizations are going to have you do a teaching demonstration. And so you got to prepare for that by putting together content and then actually delivering the content. So let's talk about that. Delivering the content doesn't mean that you're very rigid and you're like, my name is Rebecca and I am a registered nurse and I'm going to talk to you about the basics of pathophysiology, and then you start to read from your PowerPoint slides. That's PowerPoint by death. Nobody likes that because we know how to read. So what you want to do is really work on your ability to take complex materials and break it apart so that the end user understands. So you are experiencing the material with the students. If you are still here live, type a 3 in the chat. If you are still here live, type a 3 in the chat. And this is just for my producer can still see that you are here because my monitor with all the comments froze. So let's talk about that. When you are teaching, you need to have a plan as to how you're going to execute the material. You can't just get up and start talking because then you'll be all over the place. So you have to have a plan for how you're going to execute week after week after week. In a typical online setting, I'm going to say typical, you are given a course shell that could already be prepared for you. But in other situations, you may have to create that yourself. Now, did I mention that I have taught at over 20 schools since 1997? So I have seen it all. I have been the new hire on campus, and they say, here's your book, create a syllabus, have at it. Now, if you know me, I wake up every day with my boxing gloves on, so I'm up for the challenge. But you may say, I'm working a full-time job. I don't have time to put together a curriculum for this class. Are they going to pay me to do that, right? Because in most organizations, especially if you're teaching online, there's training that you have to go through, and they may not pay you for the training, or they may. So you really want to think about, is it the time for you to do it? So right now, I am on point number 3. I want you to think about your qualifications. I want you to think about your skills. And if I were you, I would write down your skills. What software products do you know? You know, Epic and 3M or any healthcare related software. All right, so number 4, we're going to talk about research. All right. So back in the day, and when I say back in the day, I would look in the newspaper, right, for adjunct positions. Today, you can go on websites like highered.gov. You can go on to the school's actual website, go to human resources, just like you would, a regular job, and see if there are opportunities available. But I have found the best way to find opportunities is networking with other professionals that are maybe working at a school already. So, or individuals that just maybe have connections, right? So looking on those different websites, meanwhile, you are putting together a packet. And what's a packet? Well, you need to have certain things ready to rock and roll. All right. You need to have certain things ready to rock and roll for this hiring process. So number 1, most schools are going to ask you for a teaching philosophy, right? So maybe your philosophy is, my goal is to give back to the future generation of healthcare professionals. I believe that education is a critical role to improving the quality of life. Whatever your philosophy is about education. A lot of people think people who have, advanced degrees altogether, like we're up here, when in actuality, the degree was just what we used to enhance what was already inside of me. And I'll give you a case in point. My husband and I were at a Chicago White Sox game last Friday. And a gentleman by the name of Brian, who went to Robert Morris College with me, he told my husband about how I could do these amazing PowerPoints, right? This was in 1997, how I could do these amazing PowerPoints and how I could deliver presentations. And over the years, I've just continued to work at that skill, but it had nothing to do with a degree. It's just who I was born. I was born as a person who likes to talk, who likes to educate each other, who likes to help everybody grow to get to the place that they want to get to, as long as they're interested in growing. If you want to grow, I want you to type growth in the chat. If you are ready to grow, I want you to type growth in the chat. Type growth in the chat. So while you are working on typing growth in the chat, I am going to just go over to my screen and get my next area together. And so the next area I want to talk about is preparing your package. Okay. So preparing your package is my topic number 5. And so what is your package? I mentioned your teaching philosophy. I mentioned that you needed to have your CV. Your CV can show your volunteer activity. So, for example, yours truly, let me take a deep breath. Yours truly is currently president-elect for the Illinois Health Information Management Association. July 1st, I will be president. You know, folks like to see that you are actively involved in your profession, in your professional organization, because you're going to bring that to the classroom, right? You're not going to talk about, well, in 1989, we did XYZ, right? Today's learner needs to experience the industry that you're teaching them through you. Because let's just face it, most of what's in a textbook is outdated by the time you get in the classroom. And so I always tell instructors, you're teaching online, right? Let's say you're teaching online. You have this online platform. Let's talk about that. What are some of the online platforms? There's Canvas, there's Blackboard, there's D2L, Desire to Learn, there's WebCT, there's Moodle. Back in the day, there was eCollege. There's so many online platforms. They're called learning management systems. There's so many systems out there, and most of the organizations are going to give you training on the system. And if they're creating a platform for you, that frees you to come up with what are you going to bring to the student experience. I like to bring in guest speakers so that they're not always hearing from me. I like to take students on a virtual field trip so that they can experience as much of the industry as they possibly can. So when they transition to the industry, they're able to function as a professional. So you got your CV. You are looking at your volunteer. If you're not volunteering, I would say volunteer. Make yourself a candidate that the school says, oh, our students are going to love this professional. Now, let's talk about my last topic, which is thriving as an adjunct. So I told you earlier that I've had situations where students didn't want to learn, but I wanted to teach them. And that was kind of a tug of war, right? Or they were there because someone else told them to be there. It is important that you understand there is a perception by students that online is easier. Online, they don't have to do any work. I personally believe that, taking the bus or getting in a car and showing up somewhere is a little easier. And so to that point, I'm going to say to you, as the professional, the other thing that you're going to have to do is while you're teaching the subject matter, you are also going to have to teach some soft skills, because you're going to receive messages where the student says, hey, right? And you're like, who are they talking to? Right? So sometimes they don't understand, even though you're the instructor, you're the industry that you're representing. And so you may have to teach some of that soft skills, and that's where you will face your first or second challenge, because students will think that, you are acting a certain way when you're really trying to get them prepared for the industry. Now, generally during an interview process, I mentioned the teaching demonstration. They're going to ask you questions about your experience. And then what you're going to do is deliver an amazing teaching demonstration, and then they'll ask you questions about why do you want to do it. Some schools have small class sizes, some schools have large class sizes, and so they're going to ask you a question or two or three to see how you fit into their culture. Also, in some instances, there's a panel that is interviewing you. It might be a content expert, it might be someone that is just there to see how are you going to interact with their student population. All right. If you are still with me, I want you to type questions in the chat because we are going to get into some questions. So if you are still with me, I want you to type questions in the chat because I don't know about you, but you know, it's in the evening, and I personally want to eat dinner. So I am going to see what questions you all have in the chat, and then I am going to get started with the first question. So let's see what we got going on here. All right, so let's see what questions we have. All right, so how do you see technology at the workplace that has changed from then to now? Well, let me just say this. Technology plays a huge role, and I see that as one deficit with students. And you may say deficit. Why? I have found that a lot of students don't have computer skills. They don't understand, Microsoft Word versus Microsoft PowerPoint. And as artificial intelligence starts to evolve, one of the things that I see happening is that there's going to have to be more that's taught by the subject matter expert instructor to help get students on track with where we are today. And so when I first started teaching, you heard me mention that I had a book, Transparency. And if you've ever heard of transparency paper, that's where you put the piece of paper on the projector and then you click this button and it displayed on the screen. And so, we got PowerPoint, we got projectors, we have all of this fancy technology that has evolved since then, and it has added to the student experience, but it has also complicated the student experience because oftentimes we don't know what skills learners do and don't have. And so you're thinking, well, I know how to do this skill. I'm teaching medical terminology, for example, so I really don't need to focus on showing someone how to use a computer. And the reality is you may have to do so. Now, I mentioned to you earlier that my little monitor was out. And so I'm going to just step over to the side and see what some of the additional questions are. So, can you typically limit what you will cover despite your level of degree? That's a very good question. So one of the things that I always say, I'm not going to teach something that I'm not comfortable teaching. One time I was assigned to teach an anatomy and physiology course. And I was like, yes, I've taken several anatomy and physiology courses, but that's not something that I feel comfortable teaching to the level that it needs to be taught. All right, so the next question is, how competitive is the interviewing process? Well, I think it depends on the school because some schools have a larger population of students as opposed to a smaller population. And let me tell you when I've seen an increase and a decrease. I'm going to go way back. Anytime there's a recession or a pending recession, enrollment skyrocket and schools are looking for faculty. And so, it depends. So right now they say we're kind of, eggs cost $10. So they say we're in a recession. And so generally what happens is enrollment increases and schools are looking for faculty. Now, I do know that depending on the state that you're in, so like California has some funky rules. Let's see, Arizona has some funky rules. And so they may require, for example, if you want to teach a healthcare course, they may require that you have a master's degree and 18 hours. All right. Okay. So there was a clarification to the question. So let me see. So how, as it relates to, oh, somebody had to go to work. Okay. You can catch the recording. All right. More questions. And if I did not answer your question to your liking, restate your question in the chat so I can make sure that I've answered your question fully. And I'm going to look at the chat, and we are going to stay on for 4 more minutes, and we are going to end the session. I really appreciate all of you popping on tonight. I am going to continue these weekly live sessions, just 30 minutes, nothing too long because it's in the evening. Everybody is tired. And so let's see if there are more questions in the chat. One other thing I will tell you, if you notice, I'm standing up. And one of the things I have found is standing up when I'm presenting, when I'm giving a lecture, I feel like if I'm online, I feel like I'm in front of a large audience and I give them the large audience experience. But if I'm sitting in a chair, I'm kind of laid back, drinking my hot tea, and the experience is different. All right. So okay, this is a good question. So you teach adults. Is the student responsible for their own attitude? So here's the reality. And I'm going to just put this very simply. At the university, the student is the customer, and the customer pays the bills. And so oftentimes you find yourself in a situation to coach, having to coach the student. Oh, there's another comment. You can lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And so I don't know if you caught this earlier, but this is something that I said. I have resolved that I'm just going to always show up and deliver the content. And it's incumbent upon the student to learn. And honestly, sometimes I don't know if that's what they're there for. I assume they're there because they want to learn, but they could be there for totally different reasons. One of the subjects that I teach is medical coding. And oftentimes students will say, well, I'm here because I want to make $80,000 a year and I want to work from home and I don't want to have to pay for daycare. When in actuality, the job of a coder, you're on a computer all day and it's not feasible for, you to not have childcare. All right. So my monitor went out again. So let me just move over and see any final questions. So it looks like the questions have stopped. Again, if you want to ask me additional questions, you can scan the QR code. You can also just Google me. Google me, Dr. Lisa L. Campbell. Dr. Lisa L. Campbell, you will find my website. You can click on the Contact Me button, and you can ask additional questions, especially for those of you who are perhaps listening to the recording. You can contact me. Well, producer, any more questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to spend part of my evening with you. I wish you all a good evening, good weekend, and I'll be back next week. I got to think about what I'm going to cover. Thank you so much.